Now, one thing we know about the development of young people in particular is that mentoring is such a powerful thing. You know, all it takes is one person to believe in you and guide you in the right direction. And our next speaker has actually been working with young people for over 30 years.
She's only 21.
She's only 21. Happy 21st, Susie. In her role across a number of school and post-school settings, Susie has extensive experience working with adolescents and young adults. She understands the pressures that young people face at critical times of their lives and the stresses that this also places on those who support them. Susie recognises that building and maintaining positive relationships is crucial in helping young people develop their personal understanding, confidence, and resilience. Her experience as a teacher, educational consultant, facilitator, and mentor has given her an extensive toolkit of skills, practical strategies, and insights to share with those who work to help young people reach their potential. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Susie Edmonds.
It's exciting to be here today. First of all, I want to acknowledge the really amazing work that you do and acknowledge that it's difficult but essential. Now, my background is in teaching, so I know that if you've been sitting too long, even though that was incredibly engaging, I learnt so much, we need to stand up. So on your table, Gail has just placed a bundle of cards. You need one of those cards, please, and if you stand up behind your chair, I'll then give you the instructions. So today's session is about building our understanding and developing some skills. Maybe you'll walk away with just a new idea on how to connect. So let's start with one of those ones. On those little cards, you'll find one side that's only got one symbol, and on another side you've got lots of symbols. The way to play this is you're going to start with the single symbol facing up. And in a moment you're going to approach somebody who's not on your table, and when you say flip, you're going to flip the card, and without making sure your hand's covering the symbols, that's good cheating technique, but anyway, without covering the symbols, it's the first person to call out the common symbol on the card. Okay, so just practice with somebody near your table first, and then I'll explain the next part. Flip your card, multiple symbols, and you need to find the common symbol. The common symbol. Part 2 of that activity. When you've found the common symbol, you're going to swap cards with the person. So swap cards. Great. Okay, and then once you've swapped cards, I'm going to ask you a question. And the question that you need to answer with the person is, what do you think the skill is that you bring to working with young people? What is the skill, or perhaps it's a character trait, that you bring in working with young people? And once you've shared that, so you might hold a curiosity, you might be able to be very present with somebody, you might find that you've got a lot of resilience in dealing with the tough issues. So once you've done that, you thank your friend, and then you go and find another friend, or someone who you don't know yet, and then you start again, single card up, flip, and then you wait to find the common symbol, you swap, you share your skill, you say see you later, and you find somebody else. Any questions that you need clarifying? So the first thing is, you can't go to somebody on your table. Your time starts now. Go and find somebody, share a skill. Introduce yourself. Keep moving around the room, find a new person. So as you finish off your conversation, stay with your partner and pause. Sorry to cut people off, but what you're going to do now is you're going to keep hold of your card. You'll say goodbye to your newfound friend in a moment. And just gaze around the room, try and eye someone that you perhaps haven't met, maybe someone way over to the south side or the west side. You're going to find that person, you're going to use the cards in the same way again, but this time the question is, I want you to think of perhaps a good mentoring relationship you've had in your life where someone has mentored you. What was it that made it a good relationship? Why was that person a good mentor? So have a little look. You're travelling to different parts of the world. If you get stuck and you can't find somebody, just come to the middle and we'll find the strays there. Off you go. So say goodbye, find a new person. Think of a mentoring relationship and why was it good? And as you finish off, just stay standing. Sorry to cut anybody off, but let's have some words. Think of one word that might describe that conversation that you had when you were explaining the mentor. What was one word that you would use to describe why that person was a good mentor that you've just shared your experience with? And throw it at me. Just give me a hand. Just go like that and they'll point. Yep. Genuine. Listening. Supportive. Heard what she said. Calm. Authenticity. Happy. Right down the back. Patient. Available. Time. Honest. Empowering. Non-judgmental. Compassionate. Role model. Tried hard. I'm going to hold... I heard the laugh after that. I'm going to hold that tried hard. Mentoring is hard. Imagine if you had to be all of those things when you turn up to be a mentor. And the roles that you do, in many ways, are about mentoring young people. And the thing about mentoring is trying to step out of your stuff and the judgment that you might have on yourself and saying, how can I make this work if I believe that the young person in front of me already has all the answers? And what you have to do is develop the skill to bring that out. I remember as a teacher, a lot of kids would come to me in year 12 and they'd want to tell me their problems or they'd want to talk about things. And sometimes I'd be like, oh, not another one. I don't know how am I going to say the right thing? I don't know what advice to give them. And it just felt like it weighed down on your shoulders. When I learnt some of the techniques that I'll teach you today, it had the ability to just free me up. So hopefully that's what I'm going to teach you. But let's just take a sideways step. These are called Ubuntu cards. And sometimes I heard people say, oh, we don't have a match. Did anyone think at any stage that they didn't have a match? Yeah. Did you always find a match? Yes, because you've got to look closely enough. These cards are magic as far as I'm concerned. They always will have one thing that matches. But you've got to dig deep. And I love a good metaphor. And it's the metaphor of what we're doing when we're working with young people, isn't it? It's about really digging deep enough to find the thing that is similar without being distracted by the differences. So how could we use these cards with young people in our work? How we go? Yeah. Yes. Perfect. It's beautifully said. It takes away that awkward feeling and it gives them an in with just one question. Okay? How else might you be able to use it?
So, Susie, because we're going to miss it on the audio, could they possibly just speak into a microphone, please?
Oh, that's clever. Yeah, okay. Great. So that was about a nice icebreaker, less judgment. I can see a hand somewhere in there moving to the table. How could you use it?
I think just explaining what you just explained to them about the fact, because I went, what did it look like you didn't have a match, but there is a match. So then transferring that to people in explaining that it looks as if everyone is different and you have nothing in common, but if you look hard enough, there'll be that one little difference. And, I found that quite inspiring. So
Yeah.
it's something that I would use in
Thank
a
you.
situation like that.
Great. Use the metaphor of the card. Excellent. If you look up Ubuntu, Ubuntu has a beautiful meaning from South Africa, and it's about connection. If you want to buy Ubuntu cards, you can go to a site called playmio.com, and it's a site in Melbourne, and he has Ubuntu cards, cheaper than other places. How else might you be able to use those in your work? Don't worry, we'll catch that on audio.
I think that visual aids to create stories as well. There's such an abundance of imagery on these cards. You could say, oh, tell me, what does these images inspire? And it could be like a storytelling activity.
Spot on. They are about story, they're about connection. There's lots of ideas. We're going to use them in a moment for something else to break open something, but you're all on the right track. Sometimes we can think that we have to have the answers and we have to build the energy and the connection, but if you dig deep enough to find something that works for you and use this tool to help them open up and work it out, and it's just going to take that pressure off you. So say goodbye to your lovely new friend, keep the card with you, and you can disappear back to your chair. So let's break this down into steps. And if you're working with the young people, what you can do is just say, have a circle of chairs set up. So instead of them going back to the place that they were, because often they'll come in clumps, you can always have a circle ready. Just say, okay, just step back and sit on the chair closest to you with your new partner next to you. So you're breaking up the group without putting pressure on them. They don't think in any way that it's orchestrated. But already you've worked out step one. And step one is about building rapport. And that is a close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. Remember, when we understand something, it doesn't mean that I have to have had the same experience as you, but it's that part of my humanity connects with your humanity, and in that is the common ground. So a mentor helps you grow as a person and become the best version of yourself. So it might be you work with someone on a career goal, or you might be challenging their limiting beliefs, or you might help them understand themselves a little bit better. Now, I want you to think about that relationship that you just spoke about a mentor. I'm going to guess that it was more circular, that you were on this level where it was an even playing field, and that it was this circular way that even though there may have been an age or an experience difference, you could certainly meet each other as equals. Now, if you think about a master-servant relationship, I want you to cast your mind back to perhaps school. Was there a teacher that you were scared of? Put your hand up if you had a teacher that frightened you. Yeah, exactly, yes, definitely. Put your hand up if you had a boss that perhaps maybe in your early job, a boss that you were afraid of. Yeah, double hands for that, double hands. What about if you played sport? Did you have a sporting coach that really frightened you? Yeah, great. What about any other extracurricular activity? Maybe it was you had a debating coach, or you had the coach of the chess team or something. Was there any dancing teacher? Was there anything like that you had, that anyone had that experience? Yes. And what it does is kind of it leaves a few scars on us sometimes, so that we just have to be aware that sometimes we're coming with our sense of experience that we may not have been able to unpack properly yet either. But if we focus on the way we want to be with young people is to have this circular approach where we know that they have the answers within themselves. This boy who's 27 years of age now, just before lockdown, before COVID happened, he sends me a photo of his beautiful new haircut. And his beautiful new haircut, because he thought it might be fun to grow a mullet because he's in AFL. Lovely haircut. And I said, oh, you look so handsome. And he texted back and he said, no, it's just a reminder of the corporate cookie cutter job that I have. And I said, oh, thinking of you, mate, just look after yourself and go make some cookies. 40 minutes later, he texted me, he said, I've just resigned. My initial reaction was, what? You've just walked away from this job you wanted? Instead, I said, wow, that must have been a really tough decision. How do you feel? And he said, I feel scared and elated at the same time. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but all I know is I can't keep getting to Friday dreading Monday. And in that moment, I understood that mentoring is about allowing them to access their own wisdom. He spent 2 weeks looking for a job. He found a job. Sunday, getting ready for work, ready to sign his contract on Monday, and Scott Morrison announced lockdown. He got a phone call to say, don't come in, the job no longer exists. And he arrived on an unemployment line on the Tuesday with a whole lot of other people, and he said it was the most humbling experience. Started a podcast, The Quarter Life Crisis, until he finally got a job. And I think that really taught me that I often want to step in and fix it, but it's such grace to have to stand back and say it's someone else's journey. So I think a really big thing is, how do we show up in the work? And there's a sheet in front of you, and it's called Values, and it's just a list. It's not the stapled sheet, it's the other one. And what I want you to do is grab a pen, and I want you to go down and just circle any value that you say, yeah, that's kind of what I want to bring to the work. And you might circle 15. But here's the clincher. Once you've circled all of them, you have to get the list down to just 2 or 3. So in other words, nothing else can happen unless those values are in play. So when you work with young people or do the work you do, what are all the values that you hold? And then decide on your final 2 or 3. Okay, next challenge. I know some of you are still going, so I'll just give you the next step in case some people are ready. Choose one of those top values and turn to the person next to you and say, when I'm working with young people, this is when I'm in the value. This is how I know I'm doing it well. So, for instance, my 3 values are presence, curiosity, and listening. So I'm living that value when I know that when I walk into that room, I leave everything else behind and I'm just very present to that person. So I'm trying to leave distractions. I'm a little bit slippery if I maybe, forget to turn my phone off and I think, I'm distracted by that. How do I stop it? And I'm definitely out of the value if when I arrive to a mentoring session, I jump out of the car and I race in and I arrive and make it all about me saying, I'm so sorry I'm late and this happened and I've been put off by this and blah, blah, and I talk too much. I'd be out of my value. Presence is I get hold of myself before I go in, I take a breath and I step in. Okay. Turn to somebody near you. Just if you've got tables that are even, just someone next door to you. Choose one of those values. When are you in it? When are you slippery? When are you out of it? Off you go. So So why are values so important? When we work with young people, we can often wonder where to start. And we'll often try and get them to set a goal, so a particular outcome. And if we go back to thinking about the example of Tom, 27-year-old, who leaves the corporate cookie cutter job, he's so led by his values, not by an outcome. The outcome was, I would love to work for Fox Sport one day. I would love to be in that industry. But he worked out that what he really wanted was a sense of connection and a team communication. And when he realised that wasn't there, he said, I just can't stay here. It just goes against my value. If you can get a student or a young person to work out what is the value behind their decisions before they make the decision, it changes to something which is transformational as opposed to transactional. You see it a lot with high achievers. If I do this, then this will happen. So the perfectionism. And then often what happens is they then go and numb themselves. And they might numb themselves by overworking, over-exercising. A lot of high achievers might move to alcohol and drugs. And it works at the other end of the scale too. But instead of fixing the problem at this point, it's going right back and saying, what is it that you value? The same thing goes for you. When you walk into a room to work with a young person, you need to be led by your values, not by your skills, because your skills will always be developing. As a teacher, I can walk out of a lesson sometimes and I'll walk in and I'll say, oh my goodness, that was like the worst lesson that I've just taught. And I might have been teaching for 28 years. So choosing your values is about setting your frame of reference. And often I say to students, the highest frame governs the game. So just imagine for a moment you're having this humdinger of a fight with your partner at home, and it's about you don't put the garbage out and you don't clean the dishwasher, and we talked about this, and you're really letting rip, and the phone rings. And you answer your phone and it's the lottery office. And they've just told you that you've won the $20 million ticket. I say that because I actually worked with someone and that happened 2 years ago. So I know it really does happen. And anyway, you get these phone calls. You don't say, oh, please, this is not a good time. I'm having an argument with my partner. We just need to finish. I'm not in a good space to hear this news. You change state straight away. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that. Oh, our life's just changed. You can change state. And often in our young people, is it a state or a trait? If it's a trait, sometimes, particularly say anxiety, if it's a trait, that's something that requires a lot more help. But if it's something that is a state, how do we teach them to change state? There's a whole nother workshop with that. But what do you do when you go to work with these young people? When you step in, are you in the headspace of, I need to fix this, I need to have the ideas? Even from the last session, you know that you're never going to be able to have all the answers and the support that you need. But you come back to your state of mind, and that comes from your values. So that was step 2. Let's have a look at what happens though. We've got this wonderful state and we're feeling great, but what happens if they throw something up at us that we don't know how to answer? Because part of mentoring is sometimes that you do have to offer a solution. You do have to offer advice. So it's really important that you're answering the right question. So I want you now to go to your Ubuntu card again, grab hold of this, and switch to the side that has multiple symbols, and we're going to use these cards as an example of what somebody shared before, of how you can use this. I want you to think of a challenge that you have when working with young people in your particular role. And I want you to choose a symbol that might explain that in some way. There's some good ones. So choose a little symbol. I did this with Youth Off the Streets the other day, and it was amazing what they came up with. Okay, so choose your symbol. Then what I'm going to teach you now is to ask clarifying questions. So when you ask clarifying questions, you leave your assumptions at the door and you can work out what it actually is that this young person is looking for. So in a moment, you're going to practice it. And in your sheets that are stapled, okay, on page 3, you've got a section down the bottom that says how to listen and ask clarifying questions. So turn to page 3 and there's a little box. What you do when you ask questions, first of all, if you ask for an opinion up on the screen, you can stick to the facts. I've noticed, I'm hearing, I'm seeing. That takes you out of judgment mode. You can open up a conversation that brings clarity by saying, tell me more, help me to understand, I'm curious about. Tell me why that doesn't fit or work for you, say more. Also great questions if you're just working in a team with the people in your community. But you're going to take this little question and you're going to find a partner that you're comfortable with and you're going to move your chairs into a space so you're facing each other, opposite each other, and move away if you're too close to anyone. Can you do that now? Find a pair, chairs facing each other. Actually move your chairs so that you're facing, because we want to be attentive listeners. Nominate one person to be the listener and one person to be the teller. Do that now, listener and teller. You are allowed to have your cheat sheet ready. So at the bottom, in that square, you've got some open-ended questions. What's going to happen is the person who's the teller is going to explain what their particular struggle is, using the symbol as a way to break it open. The person who's the listener, you're going to stay out of judgment. You're not going to say things like, oh, yeah, I know what that's like. That happened to me too. You're going to dig deeper because you're trying to get the other person to access their own wisdom. So you can ask any of these questions. You can start from the top and go down. You might only get through 2 questions. So you might say, can you tell me a little bit more about what that's like for you? Help me to understand. What would happen if one thing could be different? Okay, follow the bouncing ball, and you're going to spend at least 3 minutes just with the one person talking. Off you go. I'm just going to get you to pause for a minute. Okay. You are going to still stay with the same person who's talking and the same listener, but I want you to do a check-in. Make sure as a listener that you're not starting to lose track of the conversation by starting to offer your perspective and your thought and to share your experience of whatever they're talking about. Remember, right now you're in a mentoring role where you are trying to help this person to dig into what is going on for them. So by now you should be moving to questions that said, okay, where is that real struggle? What stops you in that moment? What's something that you could do that might change that? What would that mean to you? So just take a moment as a listener to just run your eyes down that question, those questions. You've got 2 more minutes with this person. Stay out of sharing your experience. This is about the person who's in front of you. 2 minutes starts now. If you can just close the conversation off for a moment and cast your eyes to the screen. As a listener, did you ask open-ended questions? Did you allow enough lead time? You didn't try and fill the space when they might have been thinking. Did you stop talking as a listener and offer prompts when you needed? And in listening, did you ask clarifying questions? I'm going to say this. It is really hard. Our natural ability to connect with people means we want to be in conversation with them. But that's this idea of framing. Remember, if whatever your frame of reference is, if it's about presence and curiosity, you kind of got to step back to maybe what your natural way of communicating is. And you have to have as your frame that you are trying to help the young person, or even it could be someone you work with. It could be your teenager. It could be your partner. So how do you ask clarifying questions? So remember, the symbol is just the prompt. So now we're going to swap over. The other person becomes the listener, and they're going to be asking the clarifying questions. Off you go. You've got 4 minutes. Okay, sorry to cut people off, but in the interests of moving ahead. Before we move on, I want you now to talk to the person that you've been in conversation with, and I want you to share what was it like to be listened to, and what was it like to have to listen and ask clarifying questions? Did it break things open more? Was it challenging to be able to ask questions? Was it hard to not sit in and try and solve things or share answers? So just have 1 minute to share what that experience was like. And bringing our attention back to the front of the room. For the interests of our audio, for people who might want to watch this later, can we just have maybe 3 different people share what was that experience like when you were in a discussion with someone or a listening where you're asking clarifying questions? Someone brave enough to throw in. Go for it.
I actually had a great chat because he's actually a counsellor, so I felt like I was in a therapy session. So it was amazing. I just got free therapy. No, but it was great. We found we had like a few common kind of grounds and issues that we were able to talk through together, and it was just like a very calming feeling to just have someone listen to you and not like, oh yeah, this and like butt in kind of. He was just like, oh, tell me more kind of. It was, oh, I feel so calm now.
Excellent. So it has an effect where you're a lot calmer because you're really digging into the issue. Thank you, Abby. Over here, yeah.
I found that really interesting because we both worked together and we both had similar issues. So, we have conversations and vent and debrief all the time. So this time it was very... it was different because it wasn't about, yeah, I know what you mean, and it was very much about trying to listen and just let Susan speak. But I found that at the beginning I had the form and I was looking at the questions and I wasn't really listening. I was half listening, but I was looking at the questions to think, what's the next question I'm going to ask her? And I thought, this isn't effective. But as soon as I put it down and just gave her my full attention and listened, the questions just came naturally. So I think that a lot of the time we listen with an agenda or we're listening to respond. And that's what I felt right at the beginning. And then as soon as I let that go, the conversation just flowed a lot better and it was much more natural. So
beautifully said. And you've made a couple of great points there that the questioning is hard. You actually have to practice it. I'll often be driving in the car when I was learning it and I'd try and run through the questions myself. And sometimes it can be helpful to listen to the last thing that somebody says and then build your question from that. But the great idea that we often bounce off each other because we think sharing experience is about building connection. Yeah, I know what you mean because, yeah, that happened to me. And it just stays at a surface level. And, Abby's saying that she feels calmer. What we want to do is, whether it's with our work colleagues, our family, our partners, or the people that we're working with, connection is the energy created between people when they are seen and heard without judgment. And you know yourself when someone asks you enough about your experience that you do feel seen and heard. And the more you talk about it, the more you can kind of work out this idea that, yeah, I actually might know what to do, because we want to, whether it's within ourselves and our other relationships or the people we work with, it's about building hope. And hope is belief, motivation, confidence. Because no matter what we tell someone about what they should do, whether that be about drugs or alcohol or anything else that you might want them to do, unless they have a belief in themselves, then they don't understand themselves. And remember, meaning drives motivation. And confidence is about realising that you can be confident and uncomfortable at the same time. And it might be helping someone sit long enough in being uncomfortable to know that it's not frightening. And that's when you can build autonomy. This is from a young man who's now 21, but he wrote this at 18. Young people don't need to be fixed. There is nothing wrong with them. Fixing them means stripping away their survival adaptations, which result in failure and also emotional stress and exhaustion on your end. Be there and emotionally present, but let go and be unattached to your own agenda. Young people secretly want to express themselves and just be heard in a sea of loneliness. He just wrote that for me. I said, hey, what do you think about mentoring? Will you write me? He came up with that. So, yep. He's now studying philosophy at university. Young people don't need to be fixed. Help them work out the answers within, and this is going to give them greater confidence and the ability to transfer these skills to other situations. It's about this self-mastery of their own life. It's about having that autonomy to believe that you can do anything. Okay, so on the back of your values sheet, I'm just going to ask you to do this activity that I often do with young people. I'll do it with adults as well. 1 minute, we'll keep it to working within your role and your job. I want you to write down a list of everything you worry about in your work. Write down a list of everything you worry about. You're not going to share this list. Okay, so use the back of your values sheet. And make sure you heard what I said. You are not going to share this list with anybody else. So just quietly making a list of everything you worry about in your job. Ladies, you okay? Write a list of everything you worry about in your job. Nobody's going to read it. But you need a list so you can do the second part of the activity. Okay, up on the screen are 3 circles. If you think about worries and you think about these 3 circles, anyone want to hazard a guess to what these 3 circles might mean?
The stuff we can control, the stuff we have some influence over, and the stuff that's completely out of our control.
She's got it. Okay, so it's control, influence and gravity. What a lot of young people will say, they'll say, oh, one of the things that are my really big worries, the things that I don't want to tell anyone about. And 2 are the things that maybe I can half control, like, and then 3 you don't have to worry too much. They kind of go away in a day. But if we go control, influence and gravity, in other words, things that you just have to accept, I want you to go back to your list and I want you to put a 1, 2 or 3 against each of the things that you've written on your list, and I want you to work out, is that something you can control, is that something you can influence, or is that something that is gravity? And once you've got a number against each one, work out how many 1s did you have, how many 2s, how many 3s. Okay, who had mostly the things that they worried about were number 1s, things that they could control? A couple? Yep. What about number 2? Mostly number 2s? Mostly number 3s? Okay. It's fairly typical of what most people would respond. A lot of young people spend a lot of time in the 2s and the 3 space. They worry about the things that they can only have an influence on and things that they can't even change. And the reason why is that they don't understand that there's only 4 things you can control. You can only control your speaking, your thinking, your emotions, and your behaviour. So double check your list and see if the things that you've put a 1 against, are they really within your control? Because unless it's got to do with one of these 4 things, then you can only influence it. So if we think about why young people and why we get stuck, this is something called the communication model. And what happens is that an event will occur, and then somebody will delete, distort, or generalize the information. So if you think about something that a young person might experience, there might be 100 pieces of information. Let's even take it to you. You've had a particular event. It might be something that's happened in your family. It might be something that happens at work. It might be even this conference. And to make the numbers easy, your brain might only be able to hold 10 pieces of information around that particular event. So it's going to delete information that you might not think is important. You might distort it and generalize it. And that's usually based on your experience and maybe your cultural upbringing, your background, your schooling. And you take these 10 pieces of information. Except what happens now is our brain does a bit of a dirty trick on us, because it actually doesn't like just 10 pieces of information when it comes back to putting the story together. It will create the story. And in the absence of data, we make up information in order to make sense. So in the absence of data, we make up information. But what happens in making up that story is we often get hooked by our emotion. And the emotion will magnify our fears and anxieties. And most of us will understand that whole idea that we want to be protective of the things that could go wrong. So we create this story, this B-grade movie. And this B-grade movie are one-sided worst-case scenarios. And from that, we then have feelings and emotions that start to spiral. We then have actions, and those actions lead to outcomes. So if you're working with a young person, sometimes we start on 7, we start on the outcome. But in actual fact, it's going right back to saying, what's the story that you're creating in your mind? And how do you actually stop that? Well, if you're working with a young person, a really great word, phrase to use is the story I'm telling myself is. And if you apply that to your own relationships, it might be the story I'm telling myself is when you don't put the garbage out, that you think that I've got more time than you and my job's not as important. Okay? Or your boss. The story I'm telling myself is when you don't return my emails, that you're angry with me. Can I check in with you if, that's right? So if you've checked the facts and they aren't true, time to upgrade your story. What's a better way of looking at that? But if you're not sure, or yes, it is actually true, does it require working through a messy situation, a difficult conversation, or some boundary setting? And this is where our young people get stuck. Man, it's where we get stuck. That if you are a people pleaser, you might not like conflict. If you're compassionate, you just might not know how to work through a messy situation. You may not know how to set a boundary. You might be saying yes to everything. So wouldn't it be interesting if we taught our young people, if we taught ourselves, how do we have difficult conversations and deal with conflict? How do we sit with something that makes us feel uncomfortable? But instead, what people can do is they find a way to numb instead of building those particular skills. What are they numb with? Those same things that you guys are trying to change in the community. Or it could be something that we think is fine. They're numbing with exercise. They're numbing with getting involved in everything. They're numbing in studying more. They're numbing with trying to please every member of their family. They're numbing with e-cigarettes, alcohol, sex, lots of different things. But if you go back and you give them the skill that they're missing, we might get somewhere. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is teach you the scaling question. And the scaling question is a great way that you can work with a young person so that everything doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can do it on paper, or if you're running a group, it's a great way to do it together. So it's the last thing that we're going to do. I want you to think about that challenge that you had on your Ubuntu card that you've just shared with somebody. And you can go back to the sheet of paper in a minute, but I'll get everybody to stand up behind their chairs and push their chairs in. And we'll push any other chairs near you, just push in just so that people don't fall over. And I want you to imagine that to the left of the room, the number 1, see where the CDAT form is, the banner thing, that's 1. And right at the end there where that one is, that's a 10. So just imagine in your head a scale. You could have numbers if you wanted to. So, 5 would be about here. 1 means I'm barely showing up to this. I really don't know what's going on. 10 means, I'm totally nailing it. This isn't even an issue anymore. I want you to think about the challenge that you spoke about. And a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to place yourself somewhere along that line. Now, you can imagine that the width of the line is a bit long. You don't all have to go on this section. But place yourself now. Are you a 1? I'm nowhere on top of this challenge. 10 is bring me a new challenge. Okay, go and place yourself somewhere along the scale. Okay, now that you're there, I want you just to find somebody who might be near a number with you and just acknowledge that they might be on the same number as you. Just say hello, because you're going to talk to them in a minute. Okay, so now the next question that you ask, so now you've found your pair. If you don't have a pair, you may end up being in a 3. I want you to tell the person, now a very slight nuance of language here, what has already got them to that particular number. So imagine that this is a 5. The question that you're going to ask your partner is, why are you already on a 5? Not, why are you on a 5? Because what happens, we often will then fall into telling you why we're not a 6, 7, 8. Oh, well, I'm a 5 because I don't do such and such and this isn't working, blah, blah, blah. What are you already doing that has got you to that number? Clear on the question? Okay, turn to your partner, have a chat, go. Go in pairs rather than 4s. Swap over when you're ready. Swap over. Okay, next question. And I'm just going to remind you of something. When someone's sharing, you're not making a judgment on what they're saying. So you don't have to check in with them, you don't have to soothe them, you don't have to do anything other than hear them. So if somebody says, what I'm already doing is that I'm reading a lot about this and I'm educating myself more. It's simply great. Thank you. Next person. Otherwise, you're going to get bogged down in these long conversations, and that person, as soon as someone's making a judgment on you, even if it's a positive one, there's this interesting thing that if someone comes back to you with something, like let's say, oh, I'm really struggling because I don't know how to talk to people, and someone says, oh, yeah, you do. Don't you notice that when you're really terrific with that? There's a little voice inside your head that says, oh, they don't really know me. And so what happens is, without realising it, by your positivity, you're actually flipping it for that person and you're making them feel a bit more crap about themselves. So these clarifying questions and just listening, remember, it's about helping the person inside to feel like they know the answers. And so they're going to hear when they realise for themselves, well, I'm already doing this and I'm already doing this. So if someone says, I do a lot of professional reading, great. Anything else? Oh, and I like to talk to people about, great. Is there a third thing? Yeah, I find that I love podcasts. Fantastic. So now that person knows they're doing 3 things instead of having lost a tangent where you've taken them. So for the next question, keep that in mind. And I want everybody to share, this is what you're already doing to get you to that number. If you were going to move further down the scale, what do you think you have to do less of? What do you have to do less of? Off you go. And sorry to cut you off, but in the interest of time, we'll move on. And can everyone turn and face the number 10? Turn and face the number 10. So obviously you can spend a lot more time unpacking this, but you've spent a lot of time in this room, so we won't keep you too long. Keep your partner next to you, because very quickly I'm going to ask you, if there was one step you could do today that would get you closer to the next number or further down the scale, I want very quickly just one thing that you could do. So state it to the person next to you, that one thing. Go. Make it quick, just one simple thing. It's a task list now. Okay, face number 10, nice and quiet when you're done. So, thinking of that one thing. Keep it in your head. Now remember, this is you're writing a task list now. That one thing that you could do if you are ready to take that step, whether it be this moment or whether it's when you get back and start your work, I want you to take that step forward now on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, take a step. Okay, turn to the person next to you. I think you've got another step. What is one other thing you could do? Just make a task list. One other thing you could do to get you closer down the scale. Go. Share it with them. Face number 10. Remember, you are chunking down. Don't say you have to change legislation. It's one chunk. Okay, after 3, if you're ready to take that step, 1, 2, 3, take a big step forward. And we have our third and final step in us. One other thing to chunk down what you could do. Share with your partner. Facing the number 10. Okay. We're going to do this together. On the count of 3, you're going to take a big step forward. And when you take your third step forward, let's have a round of applause as you do it. 1, 2, 3, third step, and cheer yourself. Woo! Stay where you are. Turn around. Face the other way. I want you to cast your eyes to where you started. I'm going to say to you, whether it's you or the young people you're working with, whether it's your team, whether it's what you're trying to do in this incredibly difficult but worthwhile space, don't judge yourself now by where you want to be in the future. That's the big goal. That's the vision that's in your head, whether that be the young person or whether that be your role. And remember that where you are now, what are you already doing that's got you to that? Celebrate that. That's amazing. Even if you're a 1 and it simply means you're turning up to work and getting out of bed, yay. Okay, but where are you now? What are you already doing? And in all of that, what do you want to keep doing? What do you think's really working? What do you need to maybe do a bit less of? Maybe that might be a little less perfectionism or self-loathing, or it may just be a little less worrying about something. It could be a task. What do you need to do less of? What do you need to do more of? What do you need to keep doing? And then you say, okay, that's the vision. I don't have to get there tomorrow. It might be in 3 years. It might be in a month. It might be in a week or a day. And then you say, what are just the next 3 steps I can take? And what does support look like for me? In order to take that, who do I need to get on board with me? Or where do I need to look after myself? And I think if we manage ourselves and have self-mastery of us, that's just going to flow on to young people. And so do you see that what we've done today, whether it be through cards or questioning techniques, and there's also another technique in the little stapled sheet that how you can challenge beliefs, clarifying questions, and just breaking a task down into the next step ahead. That takes away that idea of I need to have all the answers. And sometimes being okay with being on a 6 or a 7 when you know the 10 is about self-compassion and saying, you know what, I'm in my value. I value what I'm doing. This is how I do it. And work out if you're worried about the judgment of others and just show up. Because it's not what happens if something goes wrong. It's what happens when something goes wrong. Because if you're being brave enough with your life and your work and your relationships, just like with young people, something's going to go wrong. And if it doesn't, you may be just on coasting mode and you're brave enough to do it. So that's the end of our session. But I'll get you to go back to your seats just so we can collect your Ubuntu cards. Yes, thank you, newfound friends. And if one person from each table can collect the Ubuntu cards for me and bring them up to the front. And guys, if mentoring is something that you would like to know a little bit about in your communities, on the back of the stapled sheet there is a way that you can get in touch with me. And this is just such a small part of what we do. So please feel free to reach out. And I'll hand over now to Nick. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Susie Edmonds. Absolutely phenomenal work. Thank you so much, Susie. I am going to steal so many of those ideas and use them in the workshops with young people. That was absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic.
Allow them to access their own wisdom, and the story I'm telling myself is that's really going to stick with me.
Yeah, great.
Thank you so much. Susie, we have a gift for you. I think
Do I
you've
get a
seen this
bucket
one already.
hat?
You absolutely get a bucket hat.
Here you go. Oh my goodness, my head's a bit big. It makes it all. Thank you so much.
many friends.
Very exciting. Do I get a photo with
Absolutely.
you? Oh, maybe take the bucket hat off for that.
No. Hat goes on. Hat goes on.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Ready? Oh, shake hands.